On today's show, I want to run through all 7 rounds of the NFL draft and outline the dream draft prospect for Andrew Berry and the Browns in each round. So let's start with a little bit of a refresher for what the Browns are working with starting next Friday, actually, for day 2 of the NFL draft, as the Browns, yet again, are absent for the first round, but they've got a second, a third, a fifth, a sixth, and 2 sevenths. I would be surprised if they ended up picking at 227 and 243. I expect the Browns to try and use those 7th rounders and maybe even 206 to move up a little bit earlier in round number 3. But we'll go through all 7 rounds just because you never quite know who's picking in what round because of all the trades that go down during the NFL draft. Now, speaking of round 2 and day 2 of the draft, we will be live here on the channel, so reminder to subscribe and come hang out with us to get a live reaction to the Browns pick at 54. Producer Cullen Brown and myself hanging out with you for day 2 of the 2024 NFL draft. Now, let's get into it, starting with round number 1, which I don't want you guys to get your hopes up for, but we will keep it consistent here. And in round 1, a dream prospect for the Browns would be Illinois defensive tackle Jer'Zhan Newton. I would be shocked if Cleveland traded up into round number 1, but we are talking about Andrew Berry, a trade addict who, if there's an opportunity to improve, he will always look into it. I don't think he's going to have the ammunition nor the real desire to move up unless he truly falls in love with someone and doesn't want to risk them being picked before him in round 2. And Johnny Newton is someone that you could fall in love with. I'm sure he's got maybe a nice girlfriend. But from a football standpoint, last year, 8.5 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. A lot of people thought he would enter the draft after 2022. I mean, look at the numbers he put up that season in Urbana-Champaign. 14 tackles for loss, 59 pressures. No interior defensive lineman has more pressures than Jer'Zhan Newton does the last 2 seasons. Now, maybe he slips into round 2. I think he's a round 1 guy, but if he does slip into round 2, this could be someone the Browns hold their breath and hope that comes to 54, but highly unlikely. Now, someone that very well could be there at 54 is my main man, Edgerrin Cooper. If you've watched the channel all offseason long, you know that at this point I probably should get an Edgerrin Cooper jersey no matter where he goes. I'm a big fan of his play. I like the way he plays the linebacker position, especially in 2024 when linebackers are asked to do so many things more than just what they were supposed to do 20 years ago, which is stop the run and have an awesome neck brace on. But there are a lot of options for the Browns in round 2, and I kind of tossed and turned with the dream option for Cleveland at pick 54 because you're trying to find a balance of best player available, the ultimate draft cliche, which even I come, sucker to every once in a while, and drafting for need. And I think Edgerrin Cooper is one of the few players that is likely to be available in this spot. Maybe he goes a pick or 2 earlier, maybe not, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility he falls to 54, and he would check both those boxes. I think he's a fantastic football player, and I think if the Browns were looking to add a starter, linebacker would be pretty much the only position outside of running back, and that's kind of a whole separate conversation that they could find a starter in. So if you're just waking up now for your draft content, let me catch you up to speed on Edgerrin Cooper. 6'2", 230 pounds, 4.51 40-yard dash. When you talk to people about Edgerrin Cooper, you talk to Aggies fans, 3 words keep coming up: physical, violent, and fast. If you ask Jim Schwartz to make a linebacker in a lab, I think those would be the first 3 things he would ask for in a linebacker. Now, he's not a perfect linebacker. There's no real round 1 grade on him because he doesn't have those, not just elite traits, but also just elite playmaking abilities and very little weaknesses to elevate himself into a surefire like Roquan Smith type of linebacker. But when I think about Edgerrin Cooper and I watch his tape, and one name keeps coming to mind: Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And what's better than 1 JOK? 2 JOKs. And if Jim Schwartz wants to get a defense with speed on it, because offenses are getting faster and defenses have to match that. If he wants linebackers that can keep up with tight ends and slot receivers in coverage, this is your guy. Like, you're not going to find many faster linebackers in the draft. So I think Edgerrin Cooper, if you look at the linebacker room, has some similarities to JOK when he was coming out of Notre Dame. And remember, Andrew Berry traded up in round number 2 to secure Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. So if you put a linebacker room of JOK and Edgerrin Cooper on the edges just to wreak havoc and fly sideline to sideline and ask Jordan Hicks to take care of run tackling, that is something I think Jim Schwartz would be a big fan of. Now, my honorable mention that I went back and forth on was the BYU offensive tackle Kingsley Suamatia. So 6'4", 326 pounds. He is the Andrew Berry, prototypical draft prospect. He's young and he's athletic. Now, he doesn't have, he's got experience. I'll probably back that up. He does have experience. He was a 2-year starter at BYU, and he played both right and left tackle. So not only does he have experience, but he also has some versatility to his game, knowing both positions. And he's 6'4", 326 pounds. He'll be 21 years old for you week 1, and he knows how to play both tackle positions. There are a lot of GMs that would sign up for that in round 1. Now, whether or not he's there at 54 remains to be seen. A lot of mocks have him going early in round 2, but this is my dream after all, so I'm going to bend the rules. Now let's get on to round number 3, where once again I went back and forth, but I ultimately landed with Jaylen Wright, the running back out of Tennessee. So before we look at the other options I considered, let's get to know Jaylen Wright a little bit better for a second. 5'11", 210 pounds, and he ran a 4.38 40-yard dash. He's got some size to him. I don't want you to fall trap to, oh, he's kind of a gadgety running back. He must have a, really small frame and gets pushed around like a pinball. No, Jaylen Wright, he's got 210 pounds of muscle on him, and he's still running a sub-4 40-yard dash. Now, he led Tennessee in rushing the last 2 seasons. He averaged 6.6 yards per carry. He was never a workhorse back for the Volunteers. In half of his games last season, he had 12 or fewer touches. Last year, Tennessee had a 3-headed monster of a backfield, and they all had different strengths and weaknesses. But Jaylen Wright was the de facto number 1 running back and the true starter. You can look at his stats the last 2 years, primarily when he was Josh Heupel's kind of go-to back, and the guy was just a big play machine waiting to happen. Now, I know that 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns, if you're just going box score hunting, that doesn't look very impressive. But I've shared these stats before, and I know some of you are probably tuning in for the first time to kind of get the spark notes on the NFL draft. I want to compare him to Blake Corum, someone that is, I would say, perceived as a higher graded running back by most experts, right? And when you take a deeper look, sure, Blake Corum last year had 1,200 yards. He had way more touchdowns than Jaylen Wright. But when you dig a little bit deeper, Blake Corum had over 100 more carries, and he had just 1 more rush of 10 or more yards. The breakaway percentage favors Jaylen Wright by 12 points. Yards after contact. Sure, Blake Corum has more yards after contact, but that's because he has more yards because he had 100+ more carries. When you actually go pound for pound, Jaylen Wright outweighs him in every single category. So I'll take the younger guy in Wright, who's got less wear and tear, doesn't enter the NFL with knee surgery, and I think if given a bigger workload, can give you really good results. Now, I really went back and forth on this one, and I'm maybe going to regret this because I did exclude Malachi Corley as my dream round 3 target. In a perfect world, the Browns are able to get both of these guys, but that's how the draft works. You don't get everyone you want. So I'm a big fan of Malachi Corley. I think he fits with the Browns' receiving room is lacking, which is a yards after catch demon. 5'11", 210 pounds. But ultimately, I thought about what the Browns have done this offseason and last offseason to the wide receiver room and the work that Andrew Berry put into it, trading for Judy and Elijah Moore, and before that, Amari Cooper. Compared to the running back room, which has been, rightfully so, left unattended because you had Nick Chubb there. It didn't really matter who the backup running back was. Now you may not have Nick Chubb for the start of 2024. So more work should be put into the running back room. And I think it's time to let the receivers do their own thing and not keep having the need to add more receivers. You've made a lot of additions. Let's balance things out to running back. Plus, when both players are close to my overall rankings, I think Ty goes to the bigger need. And for the Browns, the bigger need is running back over wide receiver. But let me know what your thoughts are. Wide receiver or running back, a bigger need for the 2024 Cleveland Browns? I think the Browns are much more content with their wide receiver room than the fan base may believe. Whereas running back, we've got one running back coming off an ACL injury, another running back coming off an ACL, MCL, and everything else ends in an L, and Nick Chubb. Yeah, Nyheim Hines and Nick Chubb both coming off torn ACLs. You got Deontay Foreman, who was a healthy scratch at the end of last year for Chicago. And Jerome Ford proved that he is not a capable, 3-down back for Cleveland a season ago. I'm going to lean towards running back. On to round number 4, where I go with Kansas State's tight end, Ben Sinnott. So he's 6'3", 250 pounds, but the guy runs and moves like a cat. He's got a good size frame to him, but he's very gifted athletically. He walked on at Manhattan, Kansas as a fullback and then graduated to tight end, so a little bit of versatility. And you think about what Kevin Stefanski loves to do, that's get creative. I mean, he put Nick Harris at fullback last year. Imagine what he can do with a tight end fullback combination. Now, tight ends are not used very often in college football like they are in the NFL, so it's hard to really evaluate a position group that doesn't get a lot of attention, but he was still very effective for the Wildcats. 676 yards, 6 touchdowns, and David Njoku's got this position group by the balls, but after that, like Jordan Akins, Giovanni Ricci, Zaire Mitchell-Payton, you're either one injury away from Njoku having a big problem in this room, or you're not going to have a lot of 2 tight end sets to work with. Round number 5, I'm going to go with Decamerion Richardson, the corner out of Mississippi State, because, well, the Browns have a pretty good track history recently of drafting Bulldog corners. But Richardson is 6'2", 188 pounds, and ran a 4.34 40-yard dash. I know that whenever I stand up here and just kind of motor mouth and sprint through height, weight, and 40-yard dash time, it can get a little bit redundant. But when it comes to corners, please try and stick with me, because there's no more position groups that have importance than cornerbacks do to measurements. Like the difference between 5'11" and 6'2" for a corner and a wide receiver are jarringly separate. Like way more importance when a cornerback is 6'2" versus 5'11" than the same for a wide receiver. Plus, the guy ran a 4.34 40-yard dash. Now, there's been some buzz lately that he may go up into round 3 of this draft, but he's a 2-year starter that has very little production in his career. 0 interceptions, 10 pass breakups for the Bulldogs. But I go back to when Andrew Berry drafted Martin Emerson. Martin Emerson had good production at Mississippi State, but he was a traits guy. And I'm wondering if Andrew Berry sees a little Martin Emerson in Richardson. And if he does, that can't be a bad pick in my eyes at all. You can never have enough corners, especially with Greg Newsome's future on this team, a little bit of a question mark, just because of financial reasons. I think if the Browns had to pick one to pay between Emerson and Newsome, they would pick Emerson. And they've already paid Denzel Ward. So with Newsome having 2 years left on his rookie contract, and one of it being a $13+ million fully guaranteed 5th-year option for 2025, it's not a bad idea to start planting some seeds at that position group, which, by the way, is a top 3, top 4 position group in the NFL. Before we look at the rest of my dream draft targets in each single round, really quickly, Fanatics is having a really cool deal where you can get this Browns t-shirt by just going to chatsports.com/CLE shirt. I put that link for you guys in the comments and description of today's video. With the warm weather here, if you want to have some new Browns gear to wear, go check out chatsports.com/CLE shirt. Now, for round number 6, I go with Texas A&M's Gadget. That's right, Gadget. Wide receiver / running back, depending on who you ask, Ainias Smith. This is your next Demetric Felton, ladies and gentlemen. And I think Demetric Felton was just 1 or 2 years too old, because with the new special teams rules, there is a game changer to be had in getting players who are great at punt and kick returns. Specifically kick returns, because that's what's been adjusted. But there is major special teams upside to Ainias Smith. For starters, he had a punt return for a touchdown last year for the Aggies. He's got incredible versatility to his game, and I get major deja vu of Demetric Felton coming out of UCLA. And when we look at the special teams value right now, all 32 teams are trying to figure out what this new kick return is going to look like. And if I had to think about which of those 32 teams are going to be at the front, inspiring change and being tacticians and intelligent about using the rule changes to their advantage, I think it's going to be the guys with a whole bunch of Ivy League degrees hanging up in their offices, like the Cleveland Browns. So I would not be surprised if they look at this as a great special teams pick, especially when you sign Nyheim Hines to be your new return man, but he's coming off a torn ACL. This could buy you some time. Plus, it's not like the Browns have, unfortunately, a lot of luck when it comes to returners staying healthy. So why not get a backup in the process in round 6? To round out round number 7, I go with Wyoming offensive tackle, Frank Crum. Why Frank Crum, you ask? Simply because he's got incredible hair. It's round number 7. I'm not going to bullshit a bullshitter. I'm not going to stand here and act like I've got great gems that are going to be future Pro Bowl players in round 7. But I've got a guy here that would win the Minnesota State Hockey Tournament hair competition. And I used to live in Wyoming, so why not show some love back to the great Wild West? So I'll go with Frank Crum for round number 7 at offensive tackle. He really impressed, to be honest, though, at the Senior Bowl. He had some really good moments at the Combine as well, showing off his athleticism. So for an offensive tackle, I think it's a pretty good fit for the Browns. So I'll go with Frank Crum out of Laramie, Wyoming. But fix my list for me. I know you guys love to tell me what a bad job I do. So who is your dream prospect at each of those rounds or some of those rounds? Whatever it is, drop a long comment, drop a short comment, but get in the comment section below and rip me a new one. All right, let's wrap up the show by picking a card. I've got producer Cullen Brown. You want to know how nice Cullen is? Cullen wasn't supposed to come in today until 1 or so in the afternoon, but he came in at 9 a.m. to help me get my videos done. So a little 2-clap action for Cullen in the comment section. Don't do it yourself. You ruined it. All right.
You didn't hear it. They didn't hear it.
What do you want to go with?
I'm gonna go 4 hearts today.
4 hearts? I like that. It's a good pick. It's the weekend. You can get a little wild. I think jacks are wild. If I had to get a drink with these cards turned to life, it would be the Jack of Clubs. You ready? 6 of diamonds. 6 of diamonds. All right, that will do it for us on our show today. Enjoy your Friday, and I'll see you all throughout the weekend.